As Danny exited the building, the air outside felt different, heavy with anticipation. It was as if each sound, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, even the chatter of pedestrians, merged into a cacophony of uncertainty that echoed in his mind. He had ventured into the fortress only to discover a labyrinth of potential hazards, and now he could feel the walls closing in around him, squeezing out any remnants of conviction. He found himself walking aimlessly through the nearby park, its manicured lawns and well-tended flower beds contrasting starkly with the turmoil brewing in his heart. With every step, a debate raged inside him. Could he truly carry the burden of exposing such powerful adversaries? The thought of having Emily subjected to further scrutiny twisted his stomach. And yet, the desire for justice surged within him, an unwavering wave drowning out the shadows of self-doubt. Danny sat on a park bench, the cool marble beneath him reminding him that decisions had consequences that could ripple far beyond his immediate experience. He could visualize the well-tailored suits of the corporate executives, their faces twisted in disdain at the mere thought of their imperfections being laid bare. The stakes weren't just about his sister anymore. They involved a system that desperately sought to bury inconvenient truths. Taking a deep breath, he pulled out his phone and began researching corporate whistleblower protections. As each page loaded, he felt a sense of empowerment. It was not merely about confrontation. It was about the potential to uncover a significant wrong against Emily and others like her. If he could shine a light on this injustice, he would create a path for truth to emerge, a path ripe with personal growth and newfound strength. As he delved deeper, a namesake kept coming up: the ethics officer of the company. This role intrigued him. It was a position seemingly designed to protect employees against unethical practices. Could he somehow leverage this to his advantage? Vibrations of inspiration coursed through him, hinting at undiscovered resourcefulness. Rather than sitting in the dark corners of his insecurities, why not shift his approach toward enlisting allies? With determination now woven into his thoughts, he glanced at the time. He still had a few hours before his next rendezvous. He reached out to several former colleagues of Emily, seeking insights into her work environment that might further substantiate his claims. During those conversations, he discovered unexpected camaraderie from people he had once viewed as distant strangers. Each shared experience built a tapestry of support, solidifying his resolve. Driving home through familiar streets, he couldn't help but notice the changing landscape of his mind. Each encounter was a brushstroke on the canvas of this unfolding narrative. He was not just advocating for Emily anymore. He was sculpting his own identity as a champion of integrity. However, a shadow loomed ahead. It wasn't simply the threat of retaliation on his hypothetical crusade. Apprehension bubbled within him at the notion that such exposure would unearth memories of his previous failures, the jobless loser moniker that clung to him like an unwelcome apparition. He paused at a red light, wrestling with the fear that perhaps there was still a part of him that felt undeserving of this newfound purpose. Enough of that, he muttered to himself as the light turned green. This wasn't about past labels. It was about breaking free from them, transforming the narrative of his life from a tale of inadequacy into one of assertiveness and revival. When he arrived home later, he felt precariously balanced between euphoria and anxiety, the adrenaline of his endeavors coursing through him. As he opened the door, his heart pounded in rhythm with the relentless march of determination. What lay ahead could fortify him or unravel everything. He came to understand that his journey was no longer just about exposing the deceptive glimmer of corporate facades. It was a battle for every person buried beneath systems of injustice. Standing in the doorway of his house, a resolve solidified within him. This path led to a deeper understanding of himself, compelling him to rise. But as he prepared for the next day's confrontation with the ethics officer, another thought intruded. Could solidarity and support truly shield him from the storm that was brewing? The realization hit hard. He had stakes in this game far beyond his sister's firing. The revelation loomed ominously, salting the edges of his bravado with doubt. Would he inspire a movement of integrity? Or would his desperate journey expose him to devastating retaliation? As he laid down for the night, a whisper of fear clawed at his resolve. Had he truly gathered enough strength to face whatever came next? Morning light crept into Danny's bedroom, casting a glow that felt both surreal and frightening. Sleep had evaded him, his mind tangled in thoughts, replaying conversations and contemplating the confrontation awaiting him. Staring at the ceiling, he recognized the weight of the decisions ahead. The clock's ticking sound mirrored his racing heart, each tick echoing the questions rattling in his mind. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and took a long breath, sucking in courage from the cool morning air. Today would test his resolve like never before. The ethics officer was no mere bureaucratic figure. They were an embodiment of the corporate power structure he intended to challenge. A strange mix of duty and dread gripped him as he began preparing for the day ahead. In the shower, the hot water invigorated him, almost washing away the remnants of insecurity. The steam coiled around him like tentative reassurance, urging him to channel his adrenaline productively. Yet, with every splash, the memories of past failures lurked just beneath the surface, whispering doubts about his legitimacy and whether he could actually change anything. As he dressed, he deliberately chose a crisp blue button-up shirt, a color that he associated with trust. In a world where appearances were currency, he wanted to project confidence and determination. Standing in front of the mirror, he rehearsed his words, picturing the anger he'd feel directed at him, the disbelieving expressions tangled with indifference. What he hadn't anticipated was how deeply the conversation with the ethics officer would stir his resolve. He opted to bring along printed copies of everything he had gathered, documents illustrating Emily's situation, and highlighting the overarching culture he had learned about in his conversations with her colleagues. Each paper was a weapon in his arsenal, a visible testament to the precarious truths he was about to expose. Driving to the corporate headquarters, he could feel an electric hum of anxiety pulsing through him. Every red light was an unwelcome reminder of the seconds ticking away. Each traffic signal felt like a barrier between him and his mission, intensifying his urge to break through. He focused on the steering wheel, gripping it tightly as he wrestled with the emotions strangling him. This was not just about Emily. It was about the skills he was unearthing, the resilience that was taking root within him. Upon arrival, the sleek, modern facade of the building loomed large, reflecting his mixed feelings. Inside, the sterile environment of clean lines and polished surfaces felt oppressive. He sensed eyes glaring at him, people whispering and judging, even if silently. Once again, the jobless loser label flickered in the recesses of his mind, but he shoved it down. This was the time to shed the past like a snake shedding its skin. He would no longer let historic failures dictate his present. The receptionist smiled professionally, and as she directed him toward the ethics officer's office, the slow walk felt interminable. Each step echoed in his mind, fueling the tension that had grown. He was not just stepping into a room. He was stepping into a battlefield. The door opened, and he was met with the efficiency of the ethics officer, an individual who exuded an air of authority and skepticism alike. The interview began with questions intended to gauge his motivations. Why was he pushing this narrative? What did he wish to achieve? Each question led him to confront his own motivations more thoroughly than he had anticipated. As the discussion unfolded, Danny felt his authority waver for a brief moment. He hesitated, grappling with the parallels between himself and the very executives he aimed to expose, the desire for self-preservation clashing with his innate urge to seek justice. He could either retreat into ambiguity or push onward into the clarity of truth. But just as the conversation shifted toward the core concerns regarding Emily's case, the officer's demeanor shifted. A glint of recognition crossed their face when they saw the documents Danny had provided. Something hung in the air, unspoken, but laden with the gravity of possibility. Would this conversation lead to long-desired reform, or would it galvanize retaliation? Would he inspire a collaborative approach to ethics in the workplace, or would he simply become another cog in a machine hell-bent on maintaining the status quo? The intensity of the moment surged, and Danny found the resolve to press on was building within him. But as he stood at this precipice, uncertainty shadowed his thoughts. The moment of clarity Danny desperately sought eluded him, but he knew one thing. He was on the brink of something monumental. With breath steadying, he prepared to reveal everything, suddenly aware that he was no longer just representing Emily, he was standing for every worker silenced by fear. But was he truly prepared for the onslaught of repercussions this revelation could unleash? The stakes had never felt higher, and as he leaned forward to make his case, a thought sliced through the air. If he stepped into the light, Would he emerge as a figure of integrity or be consumed by the darkness of corporate backlash? The tension in the room escalated as the ethics officer leaned back in their chair, scrutinizing Danny with a piercing gaze that felt like an interrogation spotlight. The air thickened, punctuated only by the soft whir of a vent above them. For a fleeting moment he considered retreating, relying on the familiar comfort of silence. But the gravity of Emily's situation, her career precariously dangling by a thread, pulled him back. "Danny," the officer prompted, reclaiming his attention, "what you present today doesn't just have implications for Emily. It could affect the entire company culture. People will be watching." Heat flushed over Danny's skin as their words resonated deep within him, awakening the fears he thought he could master. He had never expected to be at the forefront, battling a corporate titan so entrenched in its ways. However, that fear quickly transformed into determination. Emily deserved this fight. "Yes, it could affect the culture," Danny replied, his voice firmer than he felt. "And it should. The way she was treated is unacceptable. It's not just about her. It reflects the treatment of everyone here who feels unsafe or marginalized. There are serious ethical lapses in these practices." He slowly slid the documents across the polished desk, each sheet a testament to the voices he'd amplified: the fear, the harassment, the cowardice of silence. As the officer began flipping through, Danny felt a renewed sense of purpose. With every page turned, he visualized the risks Emily had faced, the sleepless nights, the hesitations. But then came the questions that barked like the sharp crack of a whip. "And if we see merit in your claims, Danny, you understand there could be ramifications for you: retaliation from your superiors, even termination. Are you prepared for that?" Each word registered with a weight that threatened to crush him. The prospect of losing his job lingered ominously, and for a moment doubt crept in. A wave of hesitation washed over him, reminiscent of those moments before he'd taken any major leap in life. But as he glanced at the officer, the fear subsided momentarily, replaced by a burgeoning resolve that stirred within him. "I am prepared," he declared, pain sharpening the edges of his voice. "I stand by what's right over what's comfortable. For too long fear has dictated the actions of us all. If not me, then who?" The officer raised an eyebrow, intrigued but skeptical. "It takes bravery to challenge the system. You realize you may lose everything." Danny inhaled deeply, the scent of polish and office paper mingling with an intensity that coalesced his purpose. He was terrified at the thought, yet he couldn't ignore the insight that was emerging within him. This wasn't simply about keeping his job. It was about aligning his actions with his core values. He had stumbled into a moment of clarity, one that could define his narrative going forward. "At least if I lose, I'll lose fighting for something meaningful," he declared, meeting the officer's gaze with newfound intensity. "Can you say the same about this organization?" The challenge hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, Danny felt a subtle shift in the dynamic. The officer lowered the documents and leaned forward, a slight flicker of interest igniting in their otherwise stoic expression. "You do realize that standing against the establishment may transform you into a target," they said thoughtfully. "This doesn't merely end here." As Danny opened his mouth to respond, he sensed a thickening atmosphere, an unseen battle brewing not just between him and the ethics officer but within himself. Would he truly follow through on this path? What would he sacrifice: his comfort, his security, all for justice? The uncertainty stole his breath momentarily. But at that moment, mirroring the uncertainty swirling within him, he grasped a deeper aspect of his identity bursting forth: the conviction of standing up not only for Emily but for himself. Just then, the door swung open abruptly, revealing an unexpected figure from his past: the HR manager he thought he had left behind. She stood in the threshold, her expression unreadable, filling the room with an electric anticipation. "Danny," she said, catching the attention of both him and the ethics officer. "I think we need to talk now." Panic coiled in Danny's gut. This dramatic twist wasn't just about his fate anymore. It was about uncovering the true narrative at play within the company, whether he was prepared for it or not. The piercing uncertainty of what her intrusion meant loomed larger than ever. Danny's heart raced, the sudden intrusion shattering the tenuous focus he had built in the ethics meeting. He braced himself, uncertainty swirling within him like a tempest. The HR manager, Marissa, had been a formidable presence during his early years at the firm, intimidating, perceptive, and pragmatic. Now, as she stood there, he couldn't shake the feeling that she had the power to shift everything he had just fought for. "What's this about?" Danny asked, his voice steadier than he felt. There was a beat of silence, the kind that stretches endlessly, and he caught the flicker of hesitation in Marissa's eyes. The ethics officer exchanged glances with her, and Danny realized he was at the center of a game far more complex than he had ever anticipated. "I can't discuss everything here," Marissa finally said, her voice just above a whisper, glancing over her shoulder. "But it's about Emily and what you've brought to light. We need a private discussion." Danny glanced at the ethics officer, who seemed intrigued but cautious. This was no mere back and forth about paperwork anymore. There was something larger at play, a darker undercurrent swirling beneath corporate facades he hadn't yet comprehended. With a determined nod, he stood up, his resolve igniting with every heartbeat. "Lead the way," he said, his voice firm. The ethics officer raised an eyebrow, perhaps questioning his motives, but Danny was past the point of second-guessing his instincts. As he followed Marissa out of the room, he could almost feel the weight of the stares from his colleagues who dared to witness the unfolding drama. They walked down a series of sterile hallways, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, reflecting the tension that had coiled back in the pit of his stomach. Marissa finally stopped at a small conference room, one that felt too much like a knife's edge, the thin line separating vulnerability and potential danger. Once inside, she shut the door firmly and turned to Danny, an expression torn between worry and resolve etched across her face. "Listen, Danny, I know what you're attempting to do and I respect your courage, but there are nuances in this web that you don't see. You might be stirring something that's been buried for a long time." "What do you mean?" Danny pressed, battling an urgency to understand what she wasn't saying. "The company has its secrets, Danny. If you're planning to challenge the status quo, be aware that you're not just going against a few people. You might be up against a culture that doesn't take kindly to whistleblowers." Danny's mind raced. He could feel the walls closing in, the gravity of the implications weighing heavily on his shoulders. "You're suggesting I walk away?" he countered, feeling a surge of frustration. "Emily deserves justice. So do others like her." Marissa sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose as if trying to navigate her own internal conflict. "It's not that simple. I want to help you, truly I do. But you must understand that standing firm can turn you into a target. They have resources, connections. You're putting everything on the line." In that moment, Danny was struck by a wave of clarity, a revelation about the fight he was choosing. "What about you, Marissa?" he inquired, leaning forward, sensing an opportunity. "What is your role in this? Are you complicit?" Her eyes narrowed as if his words had struck a nerve. "I've worked within the confines of this system," she replied cautiously, "but I've also seen the damage it inflicts. There are things you don't know, like how many people are depending on this system to protect their livelihoods, their dignity. The stakes are higher than just one person's fight." Danny shook his head. "That doesn't make it right. This isn't just about Emily anymore, and you know it." Marissa's expression hardened, but there was a flicker of respect in her demeanor. "You're walking a perilous line, Danny. Just know if you decide to push forward, you might not get the support you think you have. You may even lose allies you didn't imagine could turn against you." The realization settled heavily in the room. It wasn't just a matter of pursuing justice for one individual. It was about confronting a pervasive complicity ingrained in the fabric of their organization. As Danny's conviction fought against the rising tide of doubt, he sensed that the next steps would come at a great cost. "Then I'll just have to be prepared for whatever comes next," he declared, solidifying his resolve. "I refuse to stand by while lives are ruined over fear." But as he spoke those words, a nagging worry lingered in the depth of his mind. What allies would remain as he forged forward? Who else still believed in justice? Little did he know that in the shadows of the organization, enemies were already taking note, plotting their own responses. The ripple effects of his decision could either galvanize a movement or seal his fate. And so, with the stakes higher than ever, he pondered the next steps he must take. The clock was ticking, and somewhere in the great machinery of the company, the tension was building, a storm waiting to be unleashed. As they left the room, deeper conspiracies loomed in the air, and a faint inkling crept into Danny's mind. Was he truly prepared for the consequences ahead? Would he ultimately be alone in this fight for justice, or would support come from the unlikeliest of places? The concept of a network sprawled across the office, could he unravel it before it consumed him? The question haunted him as they stepped back onto the floor, the stakes of the battle only just dawning on him. Danny returned to the open office space, acutely aware of the eyes that flicked toward him, judgment and curiosity lingering in the air. Each step felt magnified, as if the floor beneath him held the tectonic plates of his burgeoning resolve, and the potential fallout that could bury him beneath their weight. Behind his facade of calm, Danny's mind darted to the implications of his confrontation with Marissa. Her warning echoed like a relentless drumbeat in his thoughts. He found his desk cluttered, disorganized, a stark contrast to the ordered chaos he previously found comforting. But now each paper felt familiar, yet alien, as if they spoke of a life that no longer fit. The decision to pursue justice for Emily, and the hidden network of retaliation that lurked in the shadows, forced Danny to confront himself in a way he hadn't anticipated. He instinctively reached for a pen but hesitated. What could he possibly jot down that wouldn't risk revealing his plans, or worse, make him a target? Danny caught sight of Nicole, a colleague who often masked her intelligence behind playful banter. She was deeply invested in corporate morale, and was always the first to liven up meetings. But today, her usual spark seemed dimmed as she caught his eye with a look that communicated concern. He considered approaching her but was suddenly struck by a truth he had yet to confront. Trust was a fragile commodity in this environment. His fingers brushed the papers on his desk, sifting through them as a means to ground himself. There it was, the project proposal for Emily's department, now tinged with her absence. Bitter realizations settled in. How many others like her remained unvoiced, stuck in the machinery of a company that prioritized profit margins over dignity? Danny? Nicole's voice cut through his reverie. I've been meaning to talk to you about the meeting. Everything okay? Her concern felt genuine, and he wrestled with the instinct to confide, to unravel the web of fears he was entangled in. Instead, he opted for caution. I'll be all right, he replied, forcing a weak smile. Just trying to figure things out. How about you? She narrowed her eyes, her playful demeanor slipping just enough to reveal a deeper empathy. You know, I'm here if you need anything. Seriously. Thanks, I appreciate it, he responded, though his mind fluttered with doubts. How could he trust her when uncertainty loomed large regarding everyone's loyalty? He made a mental note to keep her at arm's length until he had more clarity. As the day dragged on, Danny became increasingly aware of his isolation, each conversation tinged with the knowledge he felt he could not share. Time ticked away, and he was left preparing for a confrontation he was not yet ready to face. The deeper he submerged himself into the details of Emily's situation, the more he felt the heavy tidal wave of consequences gathering around him. To be why the end of the workday, he resolved to dig deeper than the surface holes, examining the culture that had allowed the unethical treatment of employees like Emily to fester for so long. Danny reached for his laptop, determination igniting a sense of urgency. He knew he had to gather evidence, document the issues, find allies, and navigate this treacherous terrain. But every path he considered branched into another twist of uncertainty. The decisions ahead felt increasingly precarious, culminating in one glaring proposition: become the champion of justice, or potentially become its casualty. As the screen glowed to life, he contemplated the evidence he needed and the strategies he would employ. A faint yet crucial thought jostled in the back of his mind. Who could he trust in this unfolding conflict? Were there hidden alliances, secret supporters waiting for someone to take the first stand? And then an unexpected thought flickered. What if Nicole had her own secrets, her own hidden motivations? The weight of scrutiny only intensified, grounding him in the realization that every choice he made had the potential to reveal allies or expose enemies. Danny took a deep breath, steeling himself for the next step in this labyrinthine battle, one that could either release him from the shackles of fear or tighten them further. The moment he initiated the search for evidence, the game would officially begin. As he clicked open a browser, the first search terms materialized: whistleblower protections, corporate ethics violations, and employee abuse cases. Each click felt like a descent down a spiral staircase into the unknown. What awaited him at the bottom? Would he find the answers he sought, or nightmares he couldn't escape. The stakes had risen. The clock was ticking louder and faster now than ever before. There was no turning back. The fragile line he walked felt increasingly perilous. Would he be able to navigate the truth? Or would the unrelenting pursuit of justice consume him whole? In the weeks that followed, Danny found himself on a relentless mission, an unyielding determination radiating from the very core of his being. The days blended together as he scrutinized every lead, every piece of evidence that revealed hidden biases at Emily's workplace. He pored over policy documents, scrutinizing every line for discrepancies that betrayed an underlying pattern of discrimination. In quiet moments when doubt crept in, he would recall the laughter at the wedding, the dent it left in his soul, spurring him forward. His resolve was solidified as he built connections with former employees willing to share their stories. Each conversation buttressed his commitment to seeking transparency and justice, igniting a fire that had long smoldered within him. Danny was no longer just protecting Emily. He was crafting a narrative that demanded change. His identity began to emerge from the ashes of despair. He was an advocate, a man of integrity. It was in the company of one such ally, an ex-employee named Mark, that Danny finally realized the scope of his transformation. Mark shared an eye-opening experience, recounting his own battles against the corporate machine. Danny listened intently. The fear he once harbored transformed into solidarity. This bond revealed to Danny the interconnections among defenders of justice buried within the organization, amplifying his courage. The self-doubt that once plagued him was replaced by a growing confidence, a recognition of his own power. Then came the pivotal moment. The ethics officer responded to his extensive documentation, acknowledging the claims Danny had raised about workplace misconduct. A meeting was scheduled, with the potential for investigation looming large. Danny entered the conference room packed with more than just papers. He carried the stories of those who had been silenced, the burdens of many on his shoulders. The air buzzed with tension as he presented his findings. Each moment felt monumental. This was not just a fight for Emily, but an act of defiance against a flawed system. He laid bare the documents, allowing undeniable evidence to speak for itself. Danny's voice resonated with clarity and conviction he never knew he possessed. He articulated recommended changes to enhance workplace integrity, emphasizing the vital need for cultural shift in that room. Amid skeptics and supporters alike, Danny stood firm, empowered by a realization: perception could shift. By opting to embrace his vulnerability, he dismantled the power the jobless loser label once had over him. Instead of crumbling under judgment, he emerged a beacon of hope for those who had been sidelined. His presentation concluded, the silence stretched on like an eternity. Every eye in the room was fixed on him. The tension dissolved when the ethics officer finally spoke, acknowledging the validity of his claims. Danny, you've showcased a pattern that we cannot ignore. We will conduct a thorough investigation. It was a turning point, a moment of profound recognition. The corporate world flourished on silence. Now it was poised on the brink of accountability. As Danny left the office, the initial wave of fear was eclipsed by a swell of pride. No longer was he sitting in the shadows, shrouded by ridicule. He had conquered the daunting specter of insignificance. He had catalyzed change in the very fabric of the company while affirming his own agency. Finally, an exhilarating yet precarious sense of balance settled over him. Rather than seeking approval, he achieved self-acceptance. Danny's worth was no longer tethered to the opinions of others. Instead, he had cultivated a new identity, one defined by courage and resolve. That evening, as he sat before a gathering of sympathetic faces during a small meetup with allies committed to improving workplace culture, he vividly declared, "This isn't just about Emily. It's about every one of us here who deserves to feel safe, valued, and heard." As he spoke, he felt it. A solid peace within him, a validation of his accomplishments, an embrace of his truth. It marked not just an end, but a fulfillment of aspiration and an authentic expression of self. The shame that once held him captive melted into a potent sense of purpose. Danny had not only tackled the rampant corporate misconduct surrounding Emily's firing, he had dismantled the toxic barriers that stifled his confidence. Emerging from the ordeal, he had proven to himself that courage prevails. It was in the small victories and the tenacity to pursue justice that he discovered the essence of his transformation. A simple wedding speech labeling him a jobless loser had sparked a profound journey toward empowerment, equipped with the tenacity to challenge injustice wherever it may arise. Now, as he looked upon familiar faces radiating solidarity, a realization washed over him. He was no longer a passive observer in life. He had become an architect of change. He stepped into tomorrow bearing the dreams of many. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It's crucial for the success of our mission. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. We want to know your thoughts. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the inspiration.